Hello. Today we are going to be focusing on heart disease. And heart disease is a term that encompasses stroke, heart attack, high blood pressure, all of these problems that can arise from the circulatory or cardiovascular system. Heart disease is the leading cause of death for men and women in the United States. So if you probably know someone in your family that has high blood pressure or has had a stroke or has had a heart attack, those are all components of heart disease. And this is a pretty big topic, so we're focusing a whole lecture on it. I want to start going over blood pressure because blood pressure could be one thing that a doctor takes that can indicate if you have heart disease. So, blood pressure is just a reading, but it's a sign that there could be problems in your circulatory system. So, you've all probably had blood pressure taken before. The tool that's used to take blood pressure is referred to as a sphygmomanometer. And so this is also known as a blood pressure cuff. Before I go over this, I'm going to remind you that when your heart contracts, when the ventricles contract, we say the heart is under systole, the ventricles contracting, and that's when the arteries have to expand, right, to be able to withstand the higher blood pressure that's being exerted when the heart contracts. So remember, systole is the heart contraction. So the blood is under higher pressure. And when the heart relaxes and is filling up with blood, that's diastole. So what happens with the sphygmomanometer is that the doctor will wrap it around your upper arm where there's a main artery called the brachiocephalic artery. And the doctor will pump that cuff in order to stop blood flow from that artery. So it's blocking blood flow in an artery. And so if you look at this picture, you see to the right, they're showing you the circle, and in the top it's closed. Imagine that is the artery that's going through your arm. So when the doctor pumps up this cuff, right, they're getting the pressure way up in this gauge to maybe about 280. That's the pressure now of the cuff. And there's no blood being flown through that artery. And little by little, the doctor will start letting the air go. So reducing the pressure of the cuff. And the reading will start going back down, down, down. And maybe around 100 and something, do you see where there's systole? The doctor will hear a boom, boom. And that's when the pressure got just at the pressure that the blood is exerting when the heart's under systole. So when the heart's under systole, the blood's under really high pressure. So it was able to get through the cuff. And so the artery is kind of half open because it's only opened when the heart's contracting. And when the heart's not contracting, the cuff is sealing it. So the doctor would record that number as systolic pressure, the pressure of the blood when the heart's in systole. And then the doctor would keep releasing the air of the cuff. And when the doctor doesn't hear any noise, no sound, that means the artery is fully open and the artery is just having blood move through it continuously. And then they would mark down diastolic pressure because that's the pressure of the blood when the heart's in diastole, when it's just relaxed, the blood is still flowing. So there's two readings, the systolic and the diastolic pressure. And those two numbers tell you a lot about your health. So let's go over those numbers. So here's a chart that gives you the breakdown of categories of normal blood pressure that's too high and too low. Doctors know this by heart. I don't expect you to memorize all of these numbers. I just would like you to know what normal blood pressure is, the range, and what we refer to it if it's above normal and below normal. So normal systolic pressure, the top number, is below 120. So I would say 100 to 120 is roughly normal systolic pressure. Normal diastolic pressure is under 80. So somewhere around 50 to 80 is normal. So 120 over 70 is a pretty typical, or 110 over 70 is a pretty typical blood pressure. Now, if you get too low, if your blood pressure is too low, think of it. If the pressure is lower, the velocity is lower. So blood isn't moving fast enough. So you've all experienced this when you stand up, you're kind of dizzy. And that's because when you stand up, your pressure should go up so your blood can reach your brain quickly, because you're going to be fighting gravity. And when you get dizzy, it's often because your blood pressure is too low. It didn't contract. So people that have chronic low blood pressure can pass out. They can often feel dizzy, lethargic. So that's not good. But what's a more common problem is high blood pressure. So when we get above normal, so now let's look down on the bottom of normal. So when we get to a place of about 140 to 160 for systolic, we have what is called hypertension. Hyper means more. Your blood pressure is too high. And the diastolic number from around 90 to 99. The systolic is usually of more concern because that's the higher pressure, which can do damage, right? So often doctors focus on the systolic. So hypertension refers to high blood pressure. So why can this be a problem? Because if your blood vessels are under constant high pressure, they're more likely to tear. And if they tear, you can have what's referred to as a stroke, or you can have a heart attack, right? So high pressure is just a lot of extra force being exerted on your blood vessels. And it's also a sign that your blood vessels may be getting smaller, right? If you have a smaller opening, a smaller area, pressure is going to be greater because you can have buildup in your blood vessels. So it can be an indicator of something else going on in your body. So we'll talk about that. Let's see if you can answer this question. Jane has a blood pressure of 140 over 90. Jane has, well, those are both above normal range. So Jane would have hypertension. Now, hypo is lower than normal. Hyper is more than normal. So why do some people have hypertension? There are different reasons. Sometimes you've heard stress can increase your blood pressure. Your body releases certain hormones when you have a lot of stress that can increase your blood pressure. So that's one reason. Another reason is a type of cardiovascular disease that can result in high blood pressure, which is atherosclerosis. So here I write hypertension can be caused by atherosclerosis. So atherosclerosis is the disease state, and it's a disease of the arteries. And people that have atherosclerosis have deposits. They have material in their blood vessels, and this material is often referred to as plaques, and it decreases the opening of the vessel and thereby increases the pressure in which the blood is exerting on the wall of the vessel. So here's a picture, right? And these fat deposits, which are made up of fat, cholesterol, other materials, are what we refer to as the plaques. So in the first unit of this class, I talked about saturated versus unsaturated fatty acids. And I said saturated fatty acids are the ones that come from animal meat. Well, saturated fatty acids, saturated fats increases plaque in your arterial walls. So consuming diets with a lot of saturated fats can increase the likelihood that you get atherosclerosis. Okay, so hypertension and atherosclerosis can lead to all sorts of other cardiovascular disease issues. Stroke, you've all heard of stroke. Stroke is the result of one of your cranial or blood vessels around your brain bursting. Okay, so why would it burst? Well, if it has plaque in it and the pressure gets so high that it causes the vessel to rupture, or the plaque has dislodged, moved into a new area and ruptured, or you're just under such high pressure that it ruptures. So what happens if a blood vessel, an artery in your brain ruptures, then the capillaries that got blood from that artery aren't going to fill up with blood, which means that the cells that those capillaries service, that part of the brain is not going to get oxygen, it's not going to get glucose, and that part of the brain can die. The neurons there can die. That part of the brain is damaged. So it can kill you, it can lead to paralysis in one part of the body. And like often, if there's one stroke, there's more to come because that person probably had atherosclerosis. So if one vessel ruptures, likely another one can. A heart attack or a myocardial infarction is when a blood vessel that services the heart, right? The heart is a muscle. So it contracts, it's a pump, it releases blood, but it also needs blood to be delivered to its own cells. So there are certain arteries of the heart, the coronary arteries, the artery that gives blood to the heart, and it's very small in diameter. And if it has plaque in it, it can rupture, or that plaque can cause a full blockage, and then the heart itself isn't getting oxygen because there's no blood delivering the oxygen to that part of the heart, and that's what we refer to as a heart attack. An aneurysm is the weakening of the arterial wall. Here's a picture. Here's a main artery that goes down our bodies, down our backs, and on the left there's a normal artery. On the right, this is an artery with an aneurysm. So after blood pressure being high for so long in some arteries, it can cause the walls to get very stretchy and not thin because they've always been under such high pressure. Think of a rubber band when it loses its elasticity and doesn't recoil. That's what an aneurysm is. And it can rupture at any point. And the thing with aneurysms is you often don't know you have it. So these are all different types of heart diseases. And these are all things that really are the result of atherosclerosis. So what can you do to prevent atherosclerosis? So eat foods low in saturated and trans fats. Eat foods low in cholesterol, right? All those prevent the plaque buildup. Exercise. Your weight, watch your weight. And have your cholesterol and blood pressure checked regularly. Don't smoke. So smoking has, tobacco has nicotine, and nicotine, the chemical, constricts your blood vessels. So it decreases the area, and so it increases the pressure. And people that smoke have a much higher chances of stroke, heart attack, aneurysm. Thank you. That's it for today.